we're going to look at how do you become a better applicant when you're answering these these personal statement questions, right? What are they looking for? What's going to pop for them? What's going to be interesting for them? When we talk about organizing your resumes and what is going to be a better way for them to look at your resume and view it so that you can be seen as successful and they get the high points of that. Even getting into interview tactics, what kind of interviews, and what's going to be really key is we're going to ask these programs to share something special about them.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of CRNA School Prep Academy podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Finnell, and today we have a very special guest, Richard Wilson. Welcome, Richard, to the show.
Hey, Jenny, glad to be here. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, so we have some exciting things to share with you today. Kind of what I want you to start thinking about is how cool would it be to get guidance directly from program faculty from all across the country? I know that sounds like a dream come true, and that's exactly what we're getting ready to embark upon. And so I wanted to bring Richard on the show today to kind of discuss a private faculty podcast that is only for your ears, CSPA students, and kind of how we're going to start sharing this with you and what it's going to be about. And for those of you who are not familiar with Dr. Richard Wilson, he actually just graduated with his DNP. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. And so for those of you who have been part of the Academy, I'm sure you are familiar with Richard. But for those of you who are not, he actually has been involved with CRNA School Prep Academy from almost the beginning, about 6 months into launching CSPA. Richard contacted me. He's like, hey, Jenny, he's like, I keep seeing you pop up on people who are coming to our open house and people who are putting you on a resume. What is this all about? Who are you? And so from there, our relationship kind of formed. And since then, he's become a friend, a colleague, and he's just an astonishing CRNA and leader within the community. He's also has a very strong background in education. He's been in education for over 13 years as an assistant program director. He is also very heavily involved within the educational community and is one of the moderators for a faculty Facebook group, a private faculty Facebook group. So he's very in the know with kind of all the high points as far as what are programs looking for, what's on their radar as far as the incoming cohorts, how can they help these students to be more successful. So he's very well versed in education and the demands and the needs of the current students. So I'm so excited to have you on the show, and I'm so excited to kind of go into this new podcast. So welcome.
Thank you, Jenny. Excited about the new podcast. Also glad to get it kicked off. I think you and I had discussed this probably about a year or so ago, looking at the ideas of how can we just really benefit the community? What can we do to get them in touch with and get, like you said, advice and get mentorship directly from the source. And so it is great that we are able to move forward with this in 2023. I have spoken with a lot of faculty members over the year that are very interested in this and glad to be a part of it. The mentorship really for faculty members is a key reason of why we get into it. So again, just very, very excited about this.
Yes, me too. And gosh, if I had any kind of dream back when I first started CSPA, this was it. I wanted so badly. I didn't know how at the time, but one of my pain points was I really feel like these students need guidance directly from program faculty because, like you spoke to, you need to kind of hear what you call maybe from the horse's mouth. I know I've said that before, but the reality is, you guys, all these schools are slightly different. And that's kind of where, when I realized that when I started mentoring, I'm like, wow, this is not one code to crack. This is a bunch of codes to crack. And these schools are all looking for very unique attributes, and they all can be a little different, but yet similar. And so kind of what I see, I'm obviously viewing up from looking down and zooming in kind of, but I think people get tunnel vision when they're applying to one school and they don't realize that there's a big umbrella that kind of encompasses applying to CRNA school. And so this is an opportunity to hear a variety of opinions about what it takes to be a strong applicant, how to get through school successfully, we're gonna kind of get into more of like what are some topics we're going to cover in this special podcast. But if you are a CSPA student, this is going to be a podcast you're going to have access to. This is going to be a private podcast, so I want to be very clear with that. We will on occasion share some really juicy episodes with everyone who listens to the regular CRNA School Prep Academy podcast. So don't worry, we're not going to leave you completely in the dark. But this is going to be a special private podcast just for CSPA students. It's going to be We're going to try to aim for 4 episodes a month, so once a week release. And so, Richard, I would love to get into more of as far as what are some topics that you plan on covering on this podcast.
So, Jenny, as you were talking about a minute ago and talking about the mentorship part of it, just kind of briefly getting into that and kind of where our vision is leading into some of the episodes that we're going to look at coming forward. Really, there are a lot of people, a lot of CRNAs who have the idea of mentorship, who really want to give back to the community, who want to mentor those that want to come in. And they're going from their personal experiences of when they got into CRNA school or what it was like through CRNA school. And, so that's a very kind of narrow view of it. They mean well, and they do give some great advice. But however, it is a very kind of small picture. As we look at over the nation, there's 125 programs across the nation, and we really are expanding. And from what I'm hearing, we're about to be at 130 programs in the coming year. So that's awesome for the expansion. That's awesome for our students within CSPA. That means there's going to be more opportunities. But what we're looking at, and like you mentioned earlier, is we're trying to give them a broad view, right? We're trying to give them a bigger picture of, okay, instead of just University XYZ, let's look at how can we make you a better applicant for all 125 if we want to, because the mission, vision, and values, as you mentioned, are different for each one of those. And that's some things we're going to try to cover in there, okay? In University X, what is their mission, vision, and values? In University Y, what are theirs? So it's going to really gear you towards, if you're interested in this university, what are the things you need to be looking at? What are some of the hot topics that they have within their program? Because we all differ within each one of our assets. Again, the Council on Accreditation for Nurse Anesthesia Education Programs, COA, obviously puts out standards that every program must meet. No questions asked. You've got to have critical care experience. You have to have a bachelor's in nursing or an associate degree in nursing with a bachelor's in a science-related field, right? They've got these overarching categories that you have to fit in, but then each program gets to narrow it down to what they see as a fit for their program. So that's going to be one of our things that we want to make sure we hit, right? How do you fit into each one of their programs, or do those programs even fit for you in general? So we're going to look at everything from admission standards. We're going to look at how do you become a better applicant when you're answering these these personal statement questions, right? What are they looking for? What's going to pop for them? What's going to be interesting for them? When we talk about organizing your resumes and what is going to be a better way for them to look at your resume and view it so that you can be seen as successful and they get the high points of that. Even getting into interview tactics, what kind of interviews, and what's going to be really key is we're going to ask these programs to share something special about them. That's one thing we want people within CSPA. That's what we want our students to be able to know, is what is special about each and every program. So instead of looking at all programs and not being able to figure it out because you can't decipher from their Facebook page, their Instagram site, or their website, you're going to hear it straight from one of the faculty members. Jenny, I've already hit on this, and it's awesome to see. I've got program directors, I've got assistant program directors, clinical coordinators. We've got all kind of faculty members interested in coming on this podcast already.
Yeah, so excited for that. It's really wonderful to see the community really step up and be excited to do this. And again, that was always my dream to just, again, I was like, I don't know if this is ever going to work, but I knew in some way, in some fashion, I really want to involve the community, because we all collectively as a whole have so much that we can share and give back, but it really takes us all. And I think the value is the fact that we're all a little unique, we're all a little different, and all these programs are a little unique and different. They have different leadership and different faculty and different backgrounds and different experiences. And all of that brings a lot to the table. And as far as you picking what school is best for you and what school or what student is best for the program from their end. There are some kind of little nuances, as I would call them, about certain programs. And I would love to hit on that on this podcast, as far as, for example, some schools only require your ICU experience to be within the last 2 to 3 years. Well, what does that really mean? And do they technically give preference for those students who are active in the ICU, or do they, so because I think for students, they read a requirement or a recommendation, and it's really up for their own interpretation as far as what that really looks like on the faculty side of things when they're actually doing the interviews and looking at all the applicants. So it'd really be interesting to dive into some of those kind of more controversial topics and kind of break them down and allow these students to really understand from a faculty point of view what this recommendation truly means to them, but what are some maybe caveats around that maybe the students should take more seriously.
So yeah. Absolutely. And the great thing is, I've been a faculty member, as you mentioned, for 13 years. So I have learned the lingo over those 13 years. I've learned the nuances that you're talking about and how each program has different nuances. As we've dove into our own admission standards for our program and seeing, kind of how we compare to others. So that's going to be a fun part of this, is diving into those nuances that you talk about and deciphering what does that lingo mean, right? So when they say current ICU experience, what does that really mean? And where does that put you in these minds? We have a lot of candidates throughout the programs across the nation. Again, going to the faculty forum that I help moderate, going into the meetings for the Assembly of Didactic and Clinical Educators, which is, educators from all across the nation and from CRNA programs, and speaking with them. They all speak different languages, but when we can put it all together and we can see, okay, what are our candidates needing to do to be successful? A lot of candidates have an idea, and I don't mean this with any disrespect towards the candidates, because they're working hard, they're doing their best, they're really got a goal of getting to CRNA school, but they're looking at it and saying, okay, here's what I need to do to get in. And they're looking at a piece of paper, or they're looking at a website, they're looking at the recommendations that are put out there. But again, we're going to get it straight from the faculty's mouth, right? We're going to get it straight from them to say, okay, this is what it says, but this is what you really need to do. In other words, when it says current ICU experience, a lot of people think, okay, well, maybe current means as long as I've been in it within the last 2 years, I'll be okay. But then you're going to hear from faculty members who say, no, that's listed and that's a generality, but you're competing against 75 other people who are currently in the ICU, and this is where it makes you stand. So we're going to get that opinion on many, many different topics, and not only on admission standards. We're going to talk about what it's like to be in CRNA school. We're going to have a few faculty members that come on and say, here's what it's like to be in CRNA school. Here's what the real deal is. We're going to talk about what are the academic standards, what are the clinical training standards, how do you professionally get through a program, how do you prepare for that national certification exam at the end, and how do their programs do it. So we're really going to hopefully break all of this down. And not only are you going to get good information on how to be successful getting into school and getting through school, right? But in a manner of this, also, you're going to be able to compare schools and see what is a great fit for you.
Hey, future CRNA, another daily dose of inspiration from a CRNA School Prep Academy student. Thank you, CRNA School Prep Academy. I have applied to Case Western 4 times and got rejected 3 times. Those rejections happened before I found CSPA. After my 3rd rejection, I found an amazing mentor, Haley, through NTN's mock interview service, who told me what I need to do over the next year. I'm someone who did not do well in nursing school at the beginning, with a 2.7 GPA in undergrad and a 2.74 in RN school. I didn't know there would ever be any hope for me, but I worked my butt off to get a 3.8 in my RN to BSN, and I got my CCRN at the same time. I took some advising from the program director, who recommended that I take advanced pathophysiology. I got an A in that course. I continued to precept, do charge nurse on my units, and participate in some sort of committee. When I decided to do travel nursing, I was concerned I'd be looked at different. My program director at this time said while they take travelers, they found that travel nurses tend to take easier assignments than the program usually likes their candidates to take. I happened to be a charge nurse and preceptor on my current travel assignment. The director emphasized that I needed to mention this, which I did, because it put me apart from the other travelers. I also took my CSC this application year, which helped me study a lot sooner than I did in the past. I thought despite my efforts to consistently improve and prepare for my final interview at my top choice, my interview went poorly. I chose the first day, the first time slot, and I was more confident in my preparedness thanks to CSPA. Despite me not feeling the best, I wasn't going to give up. While working Hurricane Ian in Florida, I got a decision letter. I I was accepted. I'm still in disbelief that after 4 attempts and 3 rejections, I finally got in. I couldn't have done it without CSPA, Haley, and the amazing mock interview mentors who have helped prepare me along the way. Use this service, it will make a difference. Thank you to all the Academy for helping me achieve what I thought was impossible. Endless thank yous. Dear future CRNA, I love this share, and you know who you are, so congratulations. I'm so incredibly proud of you. And if you're listening to this story, I would love to be able to help you as well. Be sure to sign up for our free Future CRNA newsletter just by clicking the link below in the show notes or comments. Cheers to your future. Now back to the show.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love that. And this is going to be so exciting. I'm excited also to dive more into what it's like being in school, because I think that, at least I hear all the time from a lot of our students who go on to get in, which is exciting. But then they get blindsided with this fear and anxiety where they're like, oh, this is real. This is really happening. What is this going to be like? There's a lot of unknowns. You're kind of walking into a dark room and, you don't really know what's going to happen when they turn on the lights, And so I think we can shed some light on what it's really like to be in school and what the expectations are for you as a student, both academically, clinically, and professionally. And also some ways on how, in my opinion, and something I wish I would have had in school that I didn't, is how to make your time in school valuable more than just academically or clinically, but just as a professional growth aspect. Because what I have now seen in my career, which I took me over 6 years to kind of go into after graduation, but this community is amazing. And the more you can kind of engulf yourself in what it means to be a CRNA and not just the actual practice, the more rewarding and more satisfaction you're going to get out of your long-term career, and just the connections and friendships you will develop. They're lifelong friendships. And so I would love to see students understand what that's like, and how, I should say, as a student, because again, I know you're busy, but there are little tiny things that are not time consuming that you can do to really plug into the community.
In 2006, Jenny, I graduated from nurse anesthesia program, and I went straight into a level 1 trauma center working. And then within about 3 years or so, I got into the academic realm. So I was fortunate enough to be kind of thrust into a professional environment within a couple of years after anesthesia school. However, if I had not, then I would have missed out on a lot of that aspect you're talking about, because back then the professional aspect was not pushed quite as much as it is now. Now those connections and that environment of being able to get to know people, using those connections, whether it's for a job, whether it's for advice, anesthetic techniques, whatever it may be, those are bigger now than they've ever been.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I was just actually had a student yesterday when I was working, and he is, from Ohio, but he thinks he wants to go back to Texas to work. And I was like, you just got to go to conferences. That's the best way to get word of mouth, find jobs. Because he was expressing how he wasn't sure where he wanted to work. He didn't really know how to kind of navigate that. I'm like, it's just connecting with people through going to Osana's, state or spring meeting, for example, that's coming up. So, students, I think they're just going to go sit in a boring classroom and listen to people preach them some more. But the reality is that's not the way. If you've never been to a state association meeting or any national association meeting, that's not what it's like. It's connecting with, people that you were like, oh my gosh, I didn't know you were going to be here. Or, I know a CRNA in Alaska, and I'm from Ohio. So, but these events draw people from all over the country. And sometimes they're people that you may know from other areas that you may be surprised are even in CRNA school. Maybe you'll meet a fellow coworker from Arizona that you haven't worked with since you were an ICU nurse and you didn't realize they were even in CRNA school, but here they are. So it's just a really cool way to kind of see how small of a world this really is, and how you can kind of form relationships that will really serve you throughout your career.
So I laugh at that also, because I don't know if this group is old enough to know the saying, the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, obviously. But when we look at kind of CRNA programs, or we look at CRNAs in particular, we always say there's only about 2 to 3 degrees away from everybody, because somebody always knows somebody. I mean, there's 63,000 nurse anesthetists across the nation. There's 125 programs across the nation. So there's a kind of a large population of nurse anesthetists, but it's such a small group that somebody knows somebody everywhere, which is huge. And it's amazing to watch CRNAs, especially when they have students or potential students come to meetings, they're so excited to introduce them to everybody there, whether it is just CRNAs that they've practiced with for years, or whether it's leaders within the communities, leaders within the association. It's always, let me help you, let me reach out. And that's what part of this podcast, or a large part of this podcast, is going to be, is letting us help you reach out to those individuals, being able to make those contacts, right? So once you have seen, one of the directors, you'll feel more comfortable in possibly reaching out to them and talking with them, and asking them questions once you see what they're about or who they are. So it's going to be making those contacts within this podcast also that's going to be big. And something you mentioned was about, diving into programs and what it's like to be successful. Again, you said it. We're not going to focus just on academics and clinical. We're going to focus on how can you professionally and personally be successful? What's going to set you up for that once you do get into a CRNA program? We see a lot of individuals who have imposter syndrome, and we see that all the time on the Facebook forums, whether it's within CSPA or others that I'm involved with. And Jeff Ray at the University of Southern California, program director out there, one of the greatest guys you'll ever meet, that is his focus. And we're going to have him on here talking about imposter syndrome. And so we're not just going to hit on, what does a GRE mean? And what does a 3.5 in your core science courses mean? All of that. We're going to hit on every topic we can to not only make you successful getting into school, but also once you get into a program.
Yes, I love that. And that's great. And I think it's funny, another conversation I recently had too with a student was just how important it is. And I preach this a lot, but I don't know how, I think it's one of those topics that people don't realize it's a big deal until it becomes a problem, is just your mental wellness and kind of where you stand with that prior to entering school and then throughout your entire program. You guys, it is so key that you don't neglect that area of your own wellness, because that really can play a pivotal part in your success. You can be a straight A student and still struggle in CRNA school. I think people sometimes go into CRNA school with a false impression that I've always been good at academically, I'll be fine. I'm never, and I'm not saying, and please don't take this as like Debbie Downer, but I just want to mentally prepare you the fact that just because you have a track record doesn't mean that what you're getting ready to go into is going to be just what you've experienced before. It's probably more than likely going to be different, because remember, it's a different level of stress that you're getting ready to be put under. And it's a very, something you've never experienced before. So I think it's best to kind of address where you stand mentally going into your program prior to kind of let it smack you in the face and then trying to figure it out. And so part of this podcast is going to be these faculty who have seen students, good, solid students, come in and struggle and say, this is how I think they can help themselves prior to starting the program so they don't experience this amount of pressure and stress. And I also think a lot of us are perfectionists, and we are used to being top of our game, and we're used to kind of being the top. And so when we don't feel like we're achieving, we take that incredibly personally, and we think, we don't know how to handle it because we're not used to failing, right? We're used to being very successful. And so I think having a good mindset around the growth mindset, which again, we preach a lot, is really, really vital to being able to handle when occasionally maybe you have a bad test, or maybe you have a bad day in clinical or something of that nature.
Yeah, Jenny, when you talk about that, it's because, like you said, we're taking high-performing individuals, right? They've been at the top of their game. They're highly regarded and highly respected within their units, and they're coming into a program to learn more about what they're doing and to learn more about anesthesia, or to expand their knowledge base, expand their practice, right? I always look at it this way. Some people say, well, it wasn't this difficult of a transition going from high school to nursing school or anything like that. But you have to understand, when you were going from high school to nursing school, you were learning possibly a whole different lingo, a whole different, knowledge base of information. As you look at the healthcare field, when you go from the ICUs to anesthesia, you are learning more about what you're already doing, and then adding, of course, the anesthesia aspect to it. So when we talk about arterial lines, right, or neuromuscular blocking agents or anything like that, you thought you had a good understanding of it in the ICU, and you did for your level of experience, but now we're expanding on that to a whole different level. And then you start questioning yourself of, did I really even know anything? Mm-hmm. That's where some of that imposter syndrome obviously comes into when we talk about it. But that's why we want to touch on those aspects, right? And get it from people that can tell you, okay, no, you're going to go through some of these struggles. We're going to give you the real facts of the struggles you're going to go through. But how do you get through that, right? Or how do you even prepare for that before you even get there so that you're successful when it does happen, because it's going to happen.
Yeah. And, ultimately this podcast, you guys, is going to be to support you. It's going to be to support you from whether you're still figuring out whether you're going to apply to CRNA school, maybe you're in CSPA to kind of really dig into the planning tools, or maybe you're already actively working your application, or maybe you've already gained acceptance. This podcast is going to have topics on here that's really going to support you all the way through your journey. And I love the fact that we're bringing in the community to do that, because as Richard spoke earlier, people are lining up at our door to come on this podcast. They're so excited about it because they want to share. They want to help you. And one thing I have noticed too, now that I definitely have gotten to know a lot of program faculty, is their heart and their passion is for you, the student. They wouldn't be in education. I will say they would not ever be in education if they truly didn't have the heart of a mentor. They all do. They all want to see you succeed. And to being a faculty is hard work. It's, to be honest with you, I personally, now that I have seen both, I think it's easier just to be a CRNA and work and not have, but to be a faculty and a CRNA, you've just put a whole nother level of stress on you. So the fact that these faculty are doing this willingly, it's because they truly care about your success. So that's what this podcast is. It's because our community cares about you, and we genuinely want to see you succeed, and with grace and ease, right?
Yep. And so again, we're going to call it Nurse Anesthesia Educators Unplugged. And the goal is to really get down to the core with the nurse anesthesia educators of what makes a successful candidate. Our theory is, and we've said this with the CSPA a number of times, if we can get stronger candidates, then we're going to have stronger students who become stronger CRNA. So the goal, and again, with any faculty members, we want to have the strongest student possible to come in. And so if we can help with preparing that before they even get into a program, as they're going through the application process, that's what we want to do. And so I'm excited about the podcast. I think it's going to be a great mentorship opportunity. I'm excited about all the people that have really, just even from new program directors to those that have been out for a number of years, that have been CRNA for a number of years, and also been program faculty for maybe 10 and 15 years, are still excited and want to jump on this so that they can be a part of the mentorship that's going on with CSPA.
Yes. Amen. And, also, you guys, a strong student is not just a GPA. So you have to be well-rounded. And so I think you're going to be really enlightened when you listen to this podcast and realize there's so many different aspects these programs really consider and want for you and for your own success. So I'm excited to share this podcast with you. And thank you, Richard. I'm so excited to, people are probably wondering, well, when is the launch date? Now we've hyped this all up. So when can they get their ears on this podcast?
So our goal is to start filming immediately. And getting these on board. I already have several that have agreed to be on the first podcast. And therefore, our goal is going to be an early February launch date with the podcast, Nurse Anesthesia Educators Unplugged. So keep your eyes open. We, of course, will have it posted within CSPA, and excited about that launch date.
Awesome. Yes, me too. Yes, you guys. So you will be getting an email. You will be notified. And then also the format to kind of explain, like, well, how am I supposed to actually, it's going to be on Apple, iTunes, or those types of things. It's not. It's going to be inside of CRNA School Prep Academy. It's going to be kind of probably its own, I'll probably make its own separate course where you'd go in and view. If we have video, we may or may not have video for all the episodes, but we're going to have audio for sure. So you'd go into your regular Academy membership, and you would watch or listen to these podcasts there. One thing that we are going to be doing, like I said, I want to share some episodes with our listeners of CRNA School Prep Academy. So on occasion, we will be sharing some of these episodes on the regular CRNA School Prep Academy podcast. So I'm not going to leave you completely in the dark. I want to help you too, but I want to make sure that this was very special for CRNA School Prep Academy students. And I'm so excited. And thank you, Richard, so much for coming on the show and explaining to everyone this new exciting offer that we have coming in 2023.
Thank you, Jenny. Excited for it, and good luck, everybody.
Hey, future CRNA, as always, I appreciate you and your loyalty. Thank you so very much for tuning in this week. I'd love to hear from you, so screenshot this episode and share it to your IG stories with your biggest takeaway. Don't forget to tag me at CRNA School Prep Academy so I can personally thank you. Be sure to head over to CRNASchoolPrepAcademy.com to check out our blog and gather free resources to help you along your CRNA journey. Stay strong, and I'll see you next week.